I'm here with Dr Aseem Malhotra. He is a cardiologist and a health campaigner and a man very much after my own heart, but with medical qualifications, so that's nice. Now, I know you founded Action on Sugar, and part of your advocacy for healthy living and healthy eating. And man, sugar's a tough one, isn't it? Because it's incredibly addictive. And I'm a healthy person. I try and be healthy, but I have a very sweet tooth. So what is it with sugar? Why is it so addictive? And what is your take on sugar? Why is it so bad for us?
Yeah, so I wrote an article in The Guardian, in fact the Observer newspaper many years ago, which was titled Sugar is Now Enemy Number One in the Western Diet. Now that's evolved a bit, which we'll come on to, but
right.
Certainly, yeah. So what can we say about sugar? First and foremost, it has no, it's one of the few things we ingest that has absolutely no nutritional value whatsoever. It doesn't have any essential vitamins or nutrients, nothing.
Even in its natural form?
It's literally just, well, it sometimes is part of foods that have nutritional value. Right. So what we're talking about here is sucrose, which essentially is made up of 50% glucose and 50% fructose. So it's energy. That's it. It's energy. Okay.
Right.
But it's energy you don't want and it's energy you don't need. In a very basic level, it's one of the few things we ingest that directly corrodes teeth enamel. So it's the most important cause of tooth decay.
Yes.
And tooth decay, we shouldn't underestimate its impact. It's the number one reason for chronic pain in young children, number one reason for hospital admissions in young children is tooth decay. And the only thing driving that is sugar. Then we talk about other effects. And some of the stuff I've researched and written about is actually after a certain amount of sugar consumption, and I'll tell you what that is in a minute, you then start to see increases of in conditions, associated with, conditions such as type 2 diabetes,
yes,
high blood pressure, heart disease, and of course, because it's a source of unnecessary calories, and if it's added to other foods, increases your, you talked about addiction, it has an effect that's seen because we like the sweet taste. It has an effect where, for many people, it does become a form of addiction, and they overconsume. So it's a lose-lose when it comes to your health, just for a very quick instant, of course, but we love the taste of sugar, of course.
Yes.
So that's where it does harm. And after many years of some people fighting and advocating for sugar reduction policies, including myself,
yes,
the World Health Organization actually then changed their recommendations a few years ago, saying that there should be a maximum limit of sugar consumption for the average adult of no more than 6 teaspoons of sugar a day. Now,
that sounds like quite a lot.
Yeah, but most of the sugar consumption that people, consume comes from foods they don't realize have sugar in them, so hidden sugars. So these are like breads and sauces and salad dressings, and that's the real issue.
So ready-made salad dressings, sugar would have been added, but bread doesn't have sugar in it. Carbohydrates turn. It turns to sugar.
In America, almost all the bread has added sugar. Some of it does, yeah. So the way to look at it is if you look at a packet, 4 grams. So you'll read something that says carbohydrate-rich sugars. 4 grams is 1 teaspoon. So you want to be consuming no more than 20. You don't need it, first of all, but you definitely don't want to be going over 24 grams a day. Now, average consumption of sugar in Britain is probably 2 to 3 times that amount.
Really?
Okay, so that's why it's a big problem.
And so what else have you been working on with your advocating for well-being?
As the information, so there's been this confusion, if you like, for many years to try and figure out why have we got an obesity epidemic. For many years, a lot of people thought it was lack of activity. We now know that exercise, although it's great for health, has almost no impact on weight loss. Yeah. It's about what you eat. So what's driving overconsumption, and what can we do from a health policy point of view, but also help individuals, and now I help my patients, to try and help them navigate through all the nutritional advice, conflicting advice they get.
Okay, can I guess? Is it anything to do with the low-fat diet that people were advised to go by and to eat carbohydrates and sugars?
That's part of it.
Yeah.
But I think more important, more specific and more nuanced, Glenys, is ultra-processed foods. So more than half of the calories consumed in the average UK diet now comes from ultra-processed food. So what is ultra-processed food?
Yes, what is that?
Essentially any packaged food that has 5 or more ingredients, usually unhealthy oils, sugar, starches, and additives and preservatives is ultra processed. So simple rule of thumb, as I tell my patients, if you pick up anything in the supermarket and you can count more than 5 ingredients, don't eat it.
That's
ultra
so
processed.
interesting. And I mean, that's something I've always gone by, that the more ingredients anything has, and interestingly enough, I would say to beauty products as well, because I always like to go for more natural products, because I'm thinking, you know, you're consuming stuff, but you're also putting stuff on your skin. And I always go, the more ingredients on a bottle, whether you're going to consume it or put it on your skin, the more processed it is, and the more toxic ingredients it has.
Very interesting. So one of the reasons for that is the food industry figured out many years ago. So their interest is to make money and sell food and get people eating more and more food, right? Which obviously isn't good for population health, good for their profits, not good for population health. Is they've engineered these products to be hyper palatable and addictive, so you overconsume. What we're finding now, the studies on ultra processed food, and there've been many, well over 30 good sort of studies looking at the association with the consumption of these foods and many diseases, obesity, heart disease, even cancer, high blood pressure, that kind of thing, almost all of those studies are showing a signal that when you consume more ultra processed foods in populations, you get more disease.
Amazing. And what are they putting in these processed
Well,
foods
sugar,
to make them so addictive?
Well, most of them actually have added sugar, interestingly.
So
sugar,
and is that what's making
that's
it so
one
addictive?
of them, but what they do is it's a combination of ingredients together. It seems to have an adverse.
And monosodium glutamate, doesn't that make it very palatable?
That could be one of the additives for sure. I think to explain it for individuals, so with ultra processed foods comes low quality carbohydrates. So these are carbs that lack fiber. Right. So one of the other characteristics of ultra processed foods, not always, but mostly, is also foods that lack fiber. So what does it mean for your body and the physiology? Is that these foods, low quality carbs, so these are your white breads, white rice, pasta, too many potatoes. These are foods that increase your blood insulin and blood glucose. Okay. So essentially, glucose in the blood, too much glucose is bad.
Yes. It's
bad because it's linked to development of type 2 diabetes. It's bad because it's linked to the development of high blood pressure, which is the single biggest risk factor for death worldwide. Those risk factors also cause heart disease. High glucose is also something that bacteria and viruses thrive off. So high glucose actually has a negative impact on your immune system. When we look at COVID and the deaths in the world around COVID, 90% of the deaths, Glynis, from COVID in the world happened in countries where more than 50% of the population was either overweight or obese. In our country, we were about 60%.
Absolutely.
In the USA,
and it just wasn't spoken about, was it?
No.
And I also heard, and I don't know if this is true, that a lot of people who had a very bad reaction to COVID were diabetics. The diabetics didn't do well with it. Is that correct?
Yeah, very high. Type 2 diabetics, especially with poor control, had a significantly increased risk of serious illness and death from COVID.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Well, if ever there's a stark example of why not eat processed foods, and I think we all know that, don't we? That processed foods, real foods, whole foods. I mean, what is your...
The traditional meat and 2 veg. What happened to that?
Yeah, exactly. I know it was demonised. Meat and 2 veg.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with meat and 2 veg, is there?
Some of the confusion around the association, which we talked earlier about saturated fat and heart disease, happened at a time when we were trying to figure out why is heart disease so prevalent. That was before there had been before most of the public and doctors were aware of how bad smoking was. Once smoking
in the
stopped,
1960s, yes, everybody was smoking. Do you know, my stepmother started smoking on her doctor's advice to calm her down. Her doctor told her to smoke.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Well, the tobacco industry did everything they could to avoid regulation by misleading the public and even funding studies that suggested, for example, that stress was the cause and it wasn't smoking.
Now, gosh, doesn't that sound quite familiar?
Yeah. So the key is ultra processed foods and low quality carbs, eliminate those, break the addiction, and then you find you're not as hungry, and then you can eat real foods, which are very enjoyable.
It is hard. It is hard for people who do eat a lot of sugars and who eat a lot of processed, and they may go, okay, I really want to lose weight and I really want to be healthy. But when you get into that cycle of eating those foods, is there anything? I mean, how do you stop it?
So I do this with patients. I have lots of success stories.
Yeah.
I tell them they need to go cold turkey on the sugar. and the ultra-processed foods for 3 weeks. That's usually enough time to break that addiction. The appetite control mechanisms change, the palate changes. People often find, and certainly by 6 weeks, they're like, oh, I'm not craving sugar anymore. And I also speak from personal experience, because I went through all of this. I was a sugar addict, if you like. Up until my early 30s, I was consuming about 40 teaspoons of sugar a day. 40.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And once I looked at the science of it, realizing that it was bad, knowing that there was a family history of high blood pressure, that kind of thing.
Right.
And when I broke my addiction, I was shocked. I mean, I used to have, I would have chocolate cake every night after my dinner. I was in India for 2 months during my elective as a medical student. I would get a taxi every day after dinner, which was a very nice, nutritious meal, to go and have a triple sundae ice cream at this ice cream place.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I know. But the thing that's interesting now is I can't palate it anymore. I find it. I went back to, I won't name a famous brand of ice cream producers. I was on holiday not so long ago, and I thought, I haven't had this for a few years. Let me try this. I couldn't actually eat it. It was disgusting. It was so sickly sweet.
So do you never eat sugar?
Very little, and I don't.
And it doesn't. When you eat sugar, it doesn't trigger that.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't anymore. Actually, so what I tend to eat, my sugar consumption is usually in the form of a very small amount of sugar in dark chocolate, more than 80% dark chocolate.
Yeah, I do try I'm craving. That's where I go. I always have dark chocolate to hand, because the darker it is, the less sugar it has, and it just satisfies that little craving.
Yeah,
so I think that
absolutely.
I think dark chocolate is quite good for you, and we need a little bit of pleasure in our lives.
Absolutely. And this isn't about not having the occasional treat. It's the fact that sugar is insinuated its way into almost every meal. Yeah. Whether it's sugared cereal for breakfast, something sweets, or with our savoury lunch, and again having dessert.
And I mean, with Deliveroo and everybody, it's so easy to order food now, and I do think possibly the younger generation or somebody living on their own, it's so easy to order in and just never cook. And I am not the world's greatest cook, but it's so easy to just bang a salmon fillet into the oven and cook it. Or I mean, you don't have to be a major cook, but just cook from scratch is probably the best advice, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Very simple. What granny, if your granny wouldn't recognize the ingredients of a particular food item, don't eat it.
Yeah, we don't want any fancy new ingredients that none of us know what they are. Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Glynis.